It's time to talk about Tori Amos' Little Earthquakes.
Things are gonna change, I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna...
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records with Jacob Gibbons.
Welcome back to Waterproof Records with Jacob Gibbons, and that is myself. If you're thinking to yourself, okay, wait, I've never listened to Tori Amos in my life. I've heard about her. She's been around for decades, but she's not necessarily for me. Just wait. Just hold out. Because you may have found this podcast or my reviews or my videos, and you may be somebody who's more driven to like the hard and heavy stuff. But I'm telling you, if you've never given Tori Amos a chance, I want you to go on this ride with me and just listen and get a feel and hear some of the stories and about the effect that it had on me and my life. And then maybe you'll emerge from this and be like, I am a Tori Amos fan forever. Or you're already a diehard fan, and we're just going to have a great time reminiscing about this album. Tori Amos was a very, very important artist for me as a teenager and through much of my young life, and she still is. You know, I wish I could say that I have kept up with the albums over the past 5 to 10 years as much as I did when I was younger. But so often isn't that the case? We get older and we get busier and we have so much music to lean on from our past that it's hard to stay on top of everything that's coming out. But she is such an incredibly talented, beautiful, amazing soul. And I was fortunate enough to meet her once, and I'll tell that story in a little bit. But it's remarkable about how she her music came across my life and the way that it affected me and stayed with me in such a major way. And I'm wondering if it has been that way for you as well. Little Earthquakes was really the first big studio album that she dropped as Tori Amos. That was the debut, if you will. That wasn't her first path into recording as a recording artist. She had come to Los Angeles, I think, many years before, and she had done more of kind of a pop rock record called Why Can't Tori Read? And it was it wasn't a successful album at all, but it was the first thing that she put out there. She was with a band, and she was going more for like the rock and roll style. And if you know anything about Tori, she actually really loves like Zeppelin and a lot of hard rock. And here she is so gifted and talented on the piano. And it was tough because she was trying to find ways to like rock on a piano. And that wasn't an easy feat. You know, when you have guitars and drums and bass, it's pretty easy to plug in that distortion pedal and just take it away. But she continually found unique and incredible ways to really turn the piano into an extension of herself and create music that did rock, but in its own way. You know what I mean? It wasn't like you're listening to Rage Against the Machine, but she was definitely raging against a lot of machines, in her music. And really, it's kind of one of those albums that I've got to say it was like the first idea of personal therapy, I guess you could say, as a teenager, as a young man, young lad, it's the first time I really started considering a lot more self-reflection and was being challenged about my thoughts, my beliefs, my sexuality, what it meant to be a man, sensitivity towards women. It really opened a lot of those doorways for me, and I'm thankful, I'm grateful. It's made me a better man, a better father, a better husband. So, wow, this one we really dove in. If you've been listening to the show thus far, usually I spend a lot of time up top just doing shenanigans. But I think that this time around we went for it. Went for the jugular. Little Earthquakes came out. Let's see, when was the release date here? January 6, 1992. But it was released in the UK, it looks like. It took a little while. It looks like from what I've read here, she had a lot more releases coming out in the UK than the US at first. And I don't know if that was just like the record label being buttheads and thinking she would do better over there than here. I don't know. I mean, she has a huge following over there as well. She has a huge following globally. Are you kidding me? There are people that follow Tori concert to concert throughout her entire career. But this album came to me in a very interesting way because at the time, let's see, in 1992, I would have probably been in, I don't know, 7th grade. And at this time I was, this is just that era where I'm coming out of only metal and hard rock and stuff, the Metallicas, and I'm getting into the alternative and into the grunge. And this is that transitional time where I'm listening to Nirvana and Soundgarden and Smashing Pumpkins. And I get a girlfriend around here that is one of my first significant serious relationships, a girl named Kate. I even referenced her in one of my TikTok videos about Soundgarden. I did it on purpose. It's funny because in Hollywood and in screenwriting, I think you're not supposed to really pull from the true stories in your life the names, because then you have to go to like legal and get clearance from that person to be using their real name. But I don't know if the same rules apply to TikTok videos, but I was making the one about Soundgarden. And if you've seen it, the only reference I make is when I started being interested in this girl, Kate. Everybody knew in our circle of friends, she went to a different school. Everybody knew that Kate loved Chris Cornell, that she thought he was beautiful, that he was handsome. And I just remembered when I was, that was like, everybody was like, oh, you know how Kate feels about Chris Cornell. That was like a thing. And so I remembered when I was making that video that I wanted to reference her. But she was that first major girlfriend that I had. You know what I mean? Like when you have that first one, I was pretty young. This is, 8th grade, end of 8th grade. And she kind of had a similar appearance to Tori Amos at the time. And she was into Tori Amos, and she showed me Little Earthquakes. That's kind of how I found it. I think I had seen the Silent All These Years video with the white screen. I mean, it looks like Tori's walking in an Apple store with a box because it's just all white, and there's a box, and there's little mini baby pianos. Oh, somebody reached out to me on my social media when I did my Tori Amos essential albums, and I think they had bought the tiny piano, or they owned the tiny piano from the Little Earthquakes, which was incredibly cool. What a cool piece to own in your home. But I was introduced in a relationship, and I think that it's wonderful that a female introduced Tori to me, because that's a great way to be introduced to an artist, to be falling in love with somebody, and also beginning to get kind of outside of your own adolescent mind and understanding different perspectives, And, I grew up on classical music, and I listened to all sorts of piano music. My mother loved to play, artists that played the piano. Emil Pandolfi, we had Enya, we had Yanni, we had lots of classical, Chopin. And so I was no stranger. I even had tried to take piano lessons myself. I took piano lessons from about 7 years old to 9. And it was a lot of, sitting there with your piano teacher and doing the really simple stuff. I think as far as I got was Beethoven's For Elise. And, I can still play that to this day. But I got bored with it. At that age, it's kind of hard to get really excited about piano unless, I don't know. It's not that hard, because there's probably some of you listening that like started piano as a kid and now you're a virtuoso. And I really, truly regret not staying with it. One of my biggest regrets. And I have tried year after year after year to teach myself and learn really how to play piano. But it's so much harder the older you get. I'm a guitarist. I can play the guitar pretty well. But piano, I can sit down and I can pluck out tunes by ear. If I take a little time, I can play some basic chords. I could, do a very general, if I had to record my own music, I could play a couple chords if I had to, figure out something, write something there. But the guitar is my instrument. But I played piano for those years, and it was hard to get motivated because a lot of the music I would get into wasn't piano driven, right? So by the time I start wanting to play guitar, everything I'm listening to, there's a guitarist in the band. It's sexy. It draws you in. That's probably the same for a lot of you that play drums, bass. It just lures you in because you want to learn how to play these songs. But piano, I kind of wish that if I had, at this point in time, had been playing since I'd been 7, I could have tackled all these Tori songs. But I did, in order to impress Kate. I learned the intro to Winter. I taught it to myself by ear, and I remember her coming over to my house and me playing it for her. So, what a romantic. But this album is really coming into my life in a way where I'm not dealing with a lot of introspection. Adolescence is an odd time, right? Because life is moving at its own chaotic pace. You're going to school. There's friend circles. There's social cliques. and you're really trying to navigate your way through this hormonal mess that you're becoming. And, a lot of the aggressive music I was listening to, that helped me because I wasn't an athlete. I was not a sports guy at all. And so you've got all this sports in general. I mean, you could be a sports guy, sports girl, sports whatever. But I didn't have really an outlet for that aggression and that tension, that testosterone brewing in my body, and hard music, heavy music, metal, rock. That was really how I channeled that. And that's how you got rid of it. But there was a lot of other stuff that I needed to figure out. First and foremost, and this is not, okay, we're going to talk about the music, but a big thing Tori introduced to me, and it was hard as an adolescent. I was a Christian boy. I was raised in a Christian household. I lived in Tulsa. It was a Methodist family. We went to church every Sunday. I went to church on Wednesday nights with my youth group. I went to church on Friday or Saturday nights for like youth group things. I mean, I was at church so much at this point in time. I had yet to discover theater and acting as much at this age, and so much of my youth was spent at the church. Youth groups, involved in all sorts of things, mission trips, all that. Methodist though, so it's it's not like super aggressive, but well, I guess it is in its own way. It's Oklahoma. It's not like a Methodist church in a busy metropolis where it's like you go on Sunday and then you go about your life. It was a big part of my life. And if you know Tori Amos, you know that she had a religious upbringing, a very oppressive religious upbringing, and she really sings a lot about those feelings, about pushing back, feeling isolated, feeling a disconnect, feeling the shame and the guilt and so many things that at the time I'm sitting there and I'm trying to figure out if it's okay for me to think these things, to feel these things. Now, I'll tell you, whatever my audience belief system is, that's cool. You do you do your thing. I am a grown man now, and I am cool with whatever you got as long as it doesn't hurt others. But for me personally, I left the church. I left it when I was in my late 20s, and it was a lot of serious decision making. It was a long journey to get me to a place where I felt like I needed to leave, and I did, and I haven't looked back. But in my older years, I have a much more mellow, approach to people's beliefs and exploring truths and meanings. But I got to tell you, being a fan of Tori Amos was tough when you still hold onto those belief systems, right? Because there were things that I was being introduced to that made me feel uncomfortable. And great music really, really can make you feel uneasy and uncomfortable. Subject matter, lyrics, moods, feelings. It can challenge what you believe to be true, especially at 13, 14, 15 years old. You're just figuring things out, and here this beautiful artist is suggesting that maybe God doesn't know what they're doing, or maybe there is no God, or maybe God's cruel, or maybe your sexuality isn't as black and white, or maybe the sinful thoughts you have, there's nothing wrong with them. You know what I mean? Like, these were the heavy shit. Should I start my show with like a, warning, like this is not necessarily suitable for children? Because, my other podcast, the Biofriendly podcast, that's a family-friendly show. That's about the environment. That's education. There's no profanity. I chose to make this podcast explicit, not because I'm just up here dropping F-bombs left and right. That's not the kind of show it is. But I knew that there would be times that I would be talking about music and I would be compelled to just be like, fuck, or that I would just be led to express myself, and I didn't want to put a limit on that. And then also, I'm going to be having guests on the show, and as I have guests on the show, I didn't want to have them feel like, well, you can't say anything. I want this to be an open zone. So if you're listening to my show and you got kids in the car, or you're sitting around with your family, or wanting to listen to the show, I'm going to get into some uncomfortable terrains from time to time because music, it really stirs up those feelings inside, right? So this album definitely did that for me. So let's dive in. Crucify, right out of the gate. Why do we crucify ourselves? That's the opening song on this album. And Wow. I mean, right out of the gate, when you're a religious kid and you hear that word being used in a song like this, pop song, you're immediately uncomfortable, and you feel like not uncomfortable because it's bad, but because you were told it's bad to, be so flippant about the idea of being crucified, and the lyrics, why do we crucify ourselves? And it really caused me to ask these questions about this guilt and this shame that I really had. My parents were wonderful parents, and I'm not trying to say that they didn't raise me in a, guilt or oppressive way. We had a wonderful family growing up, but church just does that to you, man. It just does it. I got to be honest, it just messes you up. From the get-go, it tells you that you're wrong, that you were born sinful, and that you're only redeemed a certain way. And I got to tell you, that's not a healthy way to think as a child. It's not good. You shouldn't be thinking from the moment you have cognizance that something's wrong with you, or that your thoughts are evil, or that there's this entity that's trying to, corrupt your soul and take you. These are just things that, no, I don't, neither of my boys have that taught to them. And cheers to that. You would not believe when I look at my sons and I see them experiencing their life without any kind of like, oh, well, all these things that you feel and think are of the devil or evil, or you're only clean through, God's salvation. Anyway, this may be the point where you were a fan of mine and you suddenly turn it off, but it's hard for me to not address it. I have to address it. Big part of my life. But anyway, we'll get back to the music. Okay. I'll ease it back. So Crucify is one of those songs. And I've said before, I'm not going to do one of those things where I just talk about every single song on the album as if I know all these, behind the scenes stories. I really don't. I was a diehard Tori fan. I became one after this. I bought everything. I'm telling you guys, I caught it all. After Little Earthquakes, I was so moved. I would sit in my room with a candle lit, and my girlfriend had to go to a school in another state. She went to an art school, and I used to sit there and cry and write letters to her and listen to Tori Amos. I mean, wow, really, really took a hold of me, like the Pumpkins did. I just found this really special relationship to her music. And it really started with this album, from everything from kind of the playful piano tunes where it's like having fun on the keys. Happy Phantom is an example of that, to the really like heavy songs. I mean, Me and a Gun. Oh my gosh. Okay. So if you guys don't know this album, Me and a Gun is a song about, okay, this is sensitive subject material here. So trigger warning. And if you do have little ones in the car, we're going to talk about this. Me and a Gun is an a cappella song that Tori sings on the album about her rape. And it was important for me to hear that at this age. Me and a Gun is based on a true story that did happen to Tori in real life. I believe it was, a few years before when she was a little bit younger. And it wasn't a gun, it was a knife. She was held at knife point. She was raped. And she was threatened repeatedly by this man. And that, of course, is a nightmarish, traumatic event that will never leave you. But this song, I'm being shared at the age that I am. I'm learning in a way, this is pre-internet, and I'm not, being in the household I am, I'm not watching like graphic movies that are introducing me to these concepts. This is something that, besides conversations, this is the first time I'm really getting a glimpse into a woman's experience having endured something so terrible. And, I'm a sensitive guy, and I always have been. I, always pursued relationships and girlfriends and whatnot out of love, and definitely not somebody who has been like, one of those guys who's just like gonna try to hook up with all the ladies. That's never been me. Wasn't me as a young boy either. I was always in love. Always in love. Always had girlfriends and doted upon, and just a hopeless romantic, and still am to this day. But hearing a song, Me and a Gun, and just how awful that experience must be was, I think, a very important step in me acknowledging how horrible the world can be, and how we have to protect the ones that we love, be there, listen to them, and just, create a safe atmosphere for the ones that you care about, to create a loving, welcoming atmosphere where people can feel safe to be vulnerable, to share their feelings. And this is one of those moments that this song impacts my life in such a way that I open the door and really start to let those feelings in. And to this day, a lot of my closest male friends in my life, I have female friends as well, but my wife, she's my best friend too. But a lot of my male friends, I've really gathered and collected men who are open and vulnerable and unafraid to share what's on their hearts and their fears. I have other friends that, they're not as comfortable with that, and I'm fine with that. We talk about other things. But for the most part, it's really set me up to have friendships where you should feel safe and you should feel open. And I got to thank Tori for that. I got to thank this album for that, for allowing me to start tapping into those feelings from a young age. So I know I skipped ahead on the album, but that's okay, because we're gonna go all over the place. Wow, this is kind of this most serious podcast I think I've put out so far. But hey, not all of them are going to be funny. I may be a comic and funny guy and like to make jokes and laughter, but music, right? There are some songs that'll break you up inside, and Tori's no joke. I was saying how I became such a diehard fan. Again, I talked about this on the Pumpkins episode. I bought singles and B-sides, and this era was so great. There were CD singles that had B-sides on them, like She Has a Fantastic Version of Smells Like Teen Spirit. I remember buying it and loving that version. These awesome B-sides like Take to the Sky and Flying Dutchman, and just so many incredible songs. I mean, Upside Down, The Pool, so many. Sugar. I mean, amazing. She was so prolific. She still is so prolific, still writes so much music. You get into songs like Girl. Silent All These Years was a single. There was definitely the video for that, so I do remember that. That's a beautiful song. Precious Things was a good one for me. That was like an intense song. It's still one of my favorites on the album, just for the way she cries out vocally on that song. So powerful, really, really hits you in the heart. And then Winter. Wow. When you gonna make up your mind? That is a refrain that still kind of echoes in my mind to this day, and I think about how delicate that song, affects you. How it is cold and comforting, just like winter. It really, it's hard to put it into words sometimes, but Winter is probably the standout song on that album for me. Happy Phantom, playful and fun. China, beautiful song. Was once, I think the original title for China was an earlier song, and it was called Distance. The Distance. Leather. We start getting into some interesting things here. Mother's a beautiful song. Tear in Your Hand, beautiful song. The last song, Little Earthquakes. I love it. This is Little Earthquakes for me, the last track on the album. Is almost got this, like, when she starts doing those high notes at the end, and it's just echoing out and getting more. It's building and building and building. I love that part. And then those timpanis, those big deep drums playing. It's an incredibly powerful record, and this just led me in a love of her music, where I went out and got Under the Pink and Boys for Pele, and all the records after that. And I got a chance to see her live twice when I was in high school. I haven't seen her in a very long time. I'd love to see her, but now comes the time of the show where I'm going to tell you. I told this story on my TikTok, but I was pressed for time. It's a much cooler story that I can share with you now that really was such a special moment, and I love to tell it because it really does show what kind of a wonderful woman she is and how incredible she is. I had a weird adolescence in high school where in the middle of high school, my family picked up and moved to Illinois. And, we moved to the Chicago suburbs, made some great friendships there, but also had like one of the worst years of my life at that school. I went to Wheaton North High School, and Wheaton is like a horrible place. I mean, the college is fine. My brother went there. My mother taught there. But Wheaton as a town, you want to talk about religious oppression and a place that really cultivates just horrible, what do you even say? Like so much oppression in your brain that they think they're being good and great, but it's got a dark underbelly to the whole town. And my experience at that high school was just a nightmare. I'd like to say that I could look at you now and at 43 be like, oh, I'm over it. It doesn't matter. No, it still haunts me. I still feel like I did 25 years ago when this stuff happened, and I got to see Tori Amos play while I was at that high school. That year was a big tour, I believe, that would have been 1995 or 96. And I want to say that had to have been in support for Under the Pink. I don't think it was Boys for Pele. Maybe it was. Anyway. So I got to see this big, big venue when I was there. And that was such a tumultuous time for me. And I mean, hey, by the way, I'm fully aware that there are other kids out there and other children in the world that have had it way harder than me. I get that. I'm definitely not playing a competition here, and we're not trying to compare who had it worse. If you had a nightmarish childhood or adolescence, I understand that, and mine was, probably very privileged. But I'm only sharing with you more about the experience that I have because it's all I got, right? And this show is about me listening to music, and as we have guests on the show, we'll explore what other people's experiences are. But right now, as we're in the first 5, it's really just me sharing about what I was going through. But anyway, let's get to the Tori story that's good. I got a chance to go back to my hometown my senior year and go back to Tulsa and finish out in my high school. And at this point in time, I was in a very, very serious, committed relationship with my high school girlfriend at the time. And she and I had also loved Tori together. That earlier relationship back in Little Earthquake days, that was an important part of the relationship. But it carried on, because I think that Tori just speaks to people on an emotional level. I was a fan for life no matter what. And I tend to find girlfriends that also were into Tori. And our love of her music only grew together. So I get back into my hometown. I'm living with friends of the family. My family's still up in Illinois, and I live in Tulsa, and I'm living with one of my best friend's parents. And so Tori is going to be coming through Tulsa, Oklahoma, and she's going to be playing this concert. And my girlfriend buys the tickets. And I mean, these are great tickets. They're like front row, fantastic tickets. And like I said to you earlier, I got very involved in community theater and high school theater and choir and show choir and musical performances. Every ounce of my time as a teenager was filled up with some kind of live performance. I swear, it was so much of my life. And so sure enough, Tori's coming into town. We have these amazing tickets. And I find out that my school, I am part of a special, I'm in this show choir group, and we have a very specific performance that night that's at a location. It is not something I can get out of. I can't. And I found out it's the same night as the Tori Amos concert. Now, in hindsight, I kind of wish I would have done something a little bit more devious and lied and said I was sick or something. But, I was a good kid. I was following the rules. So I told my girlfriend, Kathy, at the time, I said, I don't know what to do. And the only solution, I think, is you go to the show, and as soon as my performance is over, I'll race over. And at the time, you're thinking, okay, I've got this performance, and it's from 6 to 7:30 or 6 to 8 or something. And the concert's not beginning until, doors at 7, things start out 7:30, 8. So I'm thinking to myself in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I might be able to just miss the first hour. And from the last Tori concert I saw back in Illinois, I saw, it was a big, big concert venue, and she played for a very long time. And so I thought, I've got a good shot at this. So I end up finishing up. I jump in my car, and it's on the opposite end of town. I'm on the south end of Tulsa. I got to get to the north end. Not a huge town, but it's going to take a minute. I get there. I drive, I park. I run into the theater, and literally, it's like the last song of the night. I think it was even already an encore. And I'm I'm mortified. Oh, poor 17-year-old Jacob is just moved to tears. I think I might have been 18, actually. moved to tears and heartbroken that he missed Tori and this special moment. And one of my good friends, Kara, had been able to sit into my seat. She had tickets to the show that were further back. And she told me later that while they were waiting on me to get there, she had my seat. And good on you, because it shouldn't have sat vacant. So I get there, I'm heartbroken, I'm out in the parking lot, then finally people start coming out from the show, and I've got tears in my eyes, I'm heartbroken, I can't believe it. I can't believe I missed the whole show. And it just, at this age, soul crushing, guys. Oof, teenage heart, broken. So Kathy comes out, my friends come out, people who were at the show come out, and they're kind of consoling me. I'm sorry. We were all hoping you'd make it, but I just narrowly missed it. It just took too long, took too long to get there. So finally, if you've ever seen Tori live, at least she did this back in the 90s, they had the barricades set up and then the tour truck over there. And I'm standing there and, we're over by the barricades and we're there early before crowds have really gathered because we're just kind of standing. And my girlfriend had brought a copy of The Jungle Book because we had read somewhere that Tori really loves that story. So she bought a copy and she wrote a note on the inside. I wrote a note on the inside. And we had it ready so that when she came out and headed to the tour bus, we could give it to her. So we're standing there. There's not a lot of people around yet. But then, sure enough, crowd starts forming and it's getting really, really crowded up against those barricades. But we're right up front. We're right in the middle of this barricade. And we're standing out there. And, I'm starting to calm down, starting to feel a little bit better. But I'm pretty despondent. I'm pretty staring off into space with red eyes. And then out comes Tori. And she's making her way towards her tour bus. And, if you've seen her live before, she makes her way down. And of course, because she is so loved and adored and does touch on things that people find very personal, she's making her way down and people are going, I love you. And they're giving her flowers and they're reaching, and she's being so sweet. She's touching their hands pre-COVID, right? She's just going and touching their hands and saying, thank you, making her. But, as an artist, what can you do when people are shouting accolades at you? You can just say thank you, right? After a while, that's all you got. And if you do this night after night after night, it's probably fairly repetitious. So she's making her way down. She gets to Kathy. Kathy hands her the Jungle Book. She says thank you, which was very sweet. And then she gets to me and I look at her in the face and she's like, been hearing all these people shouting, I love you, you're amazing, stuff. And I just look at her point blank. And I mean, she's like, we're talking maybe a foot away from my face. And I say, I missed your show tonight. And she just stops. Like as if the sound sucked out of the room, sucked out of the outside, and she stops and she just looks at me and she's like, how come? And I just explain. I go, well, my school had a choir performance and I'm part of the performance, and we had to perform at this house. It was at an event and it was booked months in advance and I didn't know, blah, blah, blah. So I was probably better at explaining it than that. This sounds pretty bad. But I explained it to her. And she just kind of goes like, I think that's awesome. And she just goes on to say things like, she goes, what's your name? And I go, Jacob. And she goes, Jacob. And from here on out, she just keeps saying my name back to me, which was so cool. She looks at me and she's like, Jacob, I'm an old hag and I'm going to be playing music for the rest of my life. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities to see me play live. And she's like, what I love is that you're pursuing your art. You're pursuing your own thing. And she just went on to tell me that really the most important thing I could ever do in life is to do what is important to me. And I was, it was pulling me out of it and starting to make me feel a lot better. And this was probably only a couple minutes, but this was like a dream. And people are still shouting things around us, but it feels like we're at a coffee bar and we're just having a coffee and talking together for a few minutes, just having a back and forth. And then finally she goes, she's talking to me and she keeps saying my name back to me. She's like, well, Jacob, you cheer up. It's going to be okay. I'm sure I'll pass through again or whatever. And she's like, and maybe one day we'll meet on different terms. She was like, maybe one day if you continue to pursue your art and your creativity, you'll do that for a living and we'll meet in that way or something like that. It was like, we'll come together again. And so she, very sweet. Then she walks on and there's more adoring fans that are saying, Tori, I love you. And she's making her way down. She gets the end of the people and then the tour bus is there and her security is ushering her towards the bus. Then this is my favorite part. And I promise you, I'm not lying. It's a true story. She stops hands whatever flower she's holding to her team. Whatever's in her hands that's been given to her, she hands it over. She makes a beeline just right back for me, just me. And she grabs my hand and she looks at me in the eyes and she says, "I'll find you again one day, Jacob." Oh, you guys. I've told that story to dear friends and people that care so many times, but I'm telling you, it's the same every time. That's the phrase that echoes in my memory, was that she said she'd find me again one day. And she has yet to find me again. But now, because of TikTok and these videos and stuff, I did do an Essentials album thing for her, for Little Earthquakes, that maybe she'll see that I'm a fan and that I love her music and I think she's amazing. And maybe she'll say, well, he didn't make it in, singing and performing, but he's making podcasts and he's doing music reviews, and that's pretty cool. This episode, I'm going to listen back to it and I'm going to be like, man, I covered like religious oppression and sexual identity and horrible traumatic subject matter and whatnot. But hey, that's Tori Amos for you. That really digs in. But I highly recommend, if you've never given her a listen. At the time, there were a lot of really strong female artists coming out. You had Liz Phair, Bjork, Sarah McLachlan, Tori Amos. So many incredible artists that were coming out and really making a difference, and Juliana Hatfield, and there's so many more incredible artists that I'm drawing a blank on. But it seemed like you'd almost pick your singer-songwriter, your female artist, and really grab a hold. And for me, it was all about Tori Amos. And this album, it really does. I should maybe save this for when I one day cover Under the Pink. But I mean, there's a song on there, God Sometimes. It's called God, and that was her hit song. And the lyric was, God, sometimes you just don't come through. Do you need a woman to look after you? And I remember I used to turn down that part, or I'd skip it. I'd skip that song, or I'd turn the lyric down because my faith at the time told me that was wrong to think those things. And it's just wild to me now that I finally get to appreciate all of her art and all of the lyrics without that guilt and that shame anymore. That might have been one of the things that held you back personally. If you didn't get into her, it came with the package. She had a t-shirt that referenced a lyric in a song that said, "I'm a recovering Christian." And I remember a friend of my brother's saw that once and said to him, "Oh, screw you, Tori," or whatever. That was his, because we were all church-going kids, But, now, does that lyric ring true or what? It really does ring true for me as an adult about all the ways that I personally in my journey had to recover and heal and, had to really readjust the way I thought about existence and what it meant to feel and think certain things without feeling bad about it anymore. And so that may have been something, if you grew up like I did, that held you back from appreciating her work. But I think it's important to dig into that stuff. I think it's important to understand grief and isolation. And I think it's important to understand being comfortable with your own body and who you are and your identity. And I said it at the beginning of the show, but Little Earthquakes was like opening the door of looking inward. It was therapy for a kid that didn't know what therapy was yet. It was my chance. It was my opportunity to ask myself if I was okay, or if maybe this whole God and Jesus thing was making me feel bad, or if I had an impure thought, maybe there's nothing wrong with me, or that there's horrible violence in the world, and I need to be one of the better men. I need to be a good man and take care of those that I love and protect them. Heavy shit. Heavy shit, but important shit. There's really nothing else that I want to say other than this album is a big part of my life, and she'll always be a big part of my life. I'd love to get the chance to sit down with Tori sometime and have that cup of coffee and just talk about how important she was. I know I went on a little bit of a tangent about living in Illinois, and I didn't really dive into that much, but I couldn't help it because this is that time, right? I moved to a new town, and so much of that year was really about leaning on comforts to get through it, no internet, no Zoom, no way to talk to friends at home, just phone calls and bands and music. That was the year that Smashing Pumpkins' Melancholy came out. Needed that album more than ever during that time. That's the time that I'm pretty sure Under the Pink came out. I should check that, actually. Does she have let's go to Tori Amos discography here, just so I can check it out, make sure. Because I want to know the years. Oh, Under the Pink was 94. I was still in Tulsa then. Okay, so it was Boys for Pele that I saw the tour. It was Boys for Pele. Yeah, that makes sense, because she was playing a lot of the harpsichord then. That was so cool in the live experience. She had the harpsichord over here, the piano over here, and she would go back and forth. It was awesome. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up right there, guys. I know I kind of ran there long, and I know this got a little heavy. And they will from time to time. They're going to get serious. They're going to get soulful. They're going to get kind of introspective. But it's an introspective album. It really does start to open up a lot of things as an adolescent. And now that I'm a father and I have a teenage son and a younger son, it really does start to open up like what they're going through and comparing it to my life. What an interesting time to be doing this. I'm literally hosting a podcast and reliving artists at the same age that my son is becoming now. It's wild. It's wild, guys. Anyway, thanks for joining me this time on Waterproof Records. This has been fun, and I hope it's been good for you guys too. And it was a serious one. So we'll see you next time.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna
Waterproof